Arnold Schwarzenegger appears during the filming of the documentary Pumping Iron in 1977, showing the height of his career in bodybuilding. The film followed his intense preparation and dedication to training, revealing behind-the-scenes aspects of the world of strength and physique competitions. German children play with piles of worthless banknotes during the height of hyperinflation in Germany in 1923. The photograph shows the little ones turning money into toys, building towers, and spreading notes on the ground, in a striking portrait of the period's economic consequences. On March 5, 1953, the ship Marine Angel, about 183 meters in length and 21 meters in width, crossed the Chicago River in an impressive navigation maneuver. Those measurements are approximately 600 feet long and 69 feet wide. An impressive photograph shows part of the estimated 400,000 people who took part in the historic Woodstock Music Festival held in 1969. The event took place on a farm in the town of Bethel in the state of New York and became one of the greatest symbols of youth culture and the movement for peace and freedom of the 1960s. The Egyptian obelisk, known as Cleopatra's Needle, is shown in its original location in the city of Alexandria, Egypt, during the 1870s. The photograph records the monument still standing on Egyptian soil before being moved to London, where it remains to this day on the banks of the River Thames. Surfers enjoy a sunny day at the beach during the 1960s, a period when surfing became popular among women and gained prominence as a symbol of freedom and a healthy lifestyle. The photograph shows a group of young people smiling beside their colorful boards, reflecting the relaxed atmosphere of beach culture of the time. Members of the group Guardian Angels patrol the New York City subway system during the 1980s, acting as volunteers to promote safety and calm in public transportation. A 1927 photograph shows a couple at their wedding being surprised by a pig that appears unexpectedly in the scene, creating a spontaneous and curious moment. The image captures the mix between solemnity and lightness, showing the newlyweds elegantly dressed, while the animal, probably belonging to the local farm or property, approaches without ceremony. Arnold Schwarzenegger and Maria Shriver are photographed at their wedding held in 1986, in a ceremony that brought together elegance, glamour, and great public attention. The celebration took place in Hyannis, Massachusetts, and marked the union between the Austrian film star and athlete and the American journalist, a member of the influential Kennedy family. Girls wait at a traffic light in Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk in the Soviet Union in the year 1968, in a simple scene that reflects the urban daily life of the time. The photograph shows young people talking and watching the street activity, while automobiles and pedestrians move in the background, composing an authentic portrait of life in a Soviet city in the Russian Far East. A couple looks over the city of Hiroshima, Japan, on August 5, 1946, 1 year after the end of the war, when the region was still going through a long process of reconstruction. The photograph shows a panoramic view of the city, revealing early signs of recovery and urban reorganization. Madeline Kahn, Mel Brooks, and Terry Garr are photographed together in New York in 1974 during one of the most creative periods of American cinema and entertainment. The image shows the trio in a relaxed mood, reflecting the artistic partnership and good humor that marked their careers. A teenager, water skies, while Mount St. Helens erupts in the background on May 18, 1980, in the United States. The contrast between the calm lake and the immense cloud in the distance creates an impressive and unique scene. Mary Monroe Sanderson, born in 1748 in Lexington, Massachusetts, is portrayed in this rare photograph, being one of the oldest people ever recorded by a camera. The image shows an elderly woman in clothing typical of the 18th century, reflecting the simplicity and dignity of a life that spanned periods of great historical change. Women from Burma arrive in the United States in 1935 in a significant moment of cultural and social exchange. The photograph shows the newly landed group bringing traditional clothing and expressions of curiosity in the new environment. A couple takes a walk near the Trinity Lavra of St. Sergius, a few hours from Moscow. The photograph shows the couple contemplating the site's historic architecture, considered one of the most important spiritual centers of Russia. Workers carve the monumental figures of Mount Rushmore in 1939 during one of the most ambitious works in the history of the United States. The sculptures were cut directly into solid granite in the Black Hills of the state of South Dakota, depicting the faces of Presidents George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. Children watch a puppet show in Paris, France. The image was made in 1963, showing the moment when the main character faces a dragon in the performance. Puppet theater was a popular form of children's entertainment, filled with fantasy and imagination. Volunteers take part in training with M16A1 rifles in Northern Ireland in 1977. The photograph shows a group of women in formation, receiving instruction and demonstrating discipline during the exercise. The record reveals women's involvement in defense activities and community organization in a period of intense political and social tension. A tenant farmer takes a break for lunch on his farm, photographed by Dorothea Lange near Clarksdale, Mississippi in 1937. The image is part of the important social record of the period, showing the simple daily life of those who worked the land during times of economic hardship. The so-called smallest shop in the world in London in the year 1900. The photograph shows a tiny kiosk set on the side of a building where the seller serves customers through a narrow window. Yuri Gagarin is photographed reading news about himself on April 13, 1961, only one day after becoming the first human being to travel into space. The image shows the smiling Soviet cosmonaut holding a newspaper that highlighted his historic mission aboard the spacecraft Vostok 1, carried out on April 12th of that year. Elvis Presley and Deborah Paget are photographed on the set of the film Love Me Tender in 1956, marking Elvis's debut in cinema. The image shows the two artists between scenes, in a relaxed moment during filming. Transatlantic ships are docked at the New York passenger terminal around 1960, a period when sea travel still represented one of the primary means of international transportation. In 1929, Vivian Bales traveled across the United States riding her Harley-Davidson motorcycle of the same year on a journey that lasted 78 days and covered approximately 5,000 miles. Audrey Hepburn is photographed while reviewing a script before recording a program for the United Nations Children's Fund at United Nations Radio around 1953. The image shows the actress in a moment of focus and calm, reflecting her commitment to humanitarian causes early in her career. Young people listened to music during the 1970s, a period marked by cultural explosion and by the strength of artistic and social movements. The photograph shows a group gathered around a record player or radio, sharing headphones, or simply enjoying the loud sound of the tracks that defined the time. Soldiers of the Royal Hungarian Army are photographed in a field kitchen in 1938 during a pause between military activities. The image shows the men gathered around large pots and portable stoves, preparing meals that would sustain troops on duty. The Great New York City blackout that occurred in 1977 was an interruption of electrical power that lasted about 25 hours and affected millions of people. During that period, the city was completely dark, with streets, buildings, and subways without lighting. A black and white photograph shows how young people had fun in 1959, reflecting the light and creative spirit of a generation in transition. The image portrays teenagers gathered for a moment of leisure, perhaps on a street, in a park, or in a schoolyard, enjoying free time with laughter and simple play. John Fitzgerald Kennedy and Jacqueline Bouvier are portrayed at their wedding held in 1953 in Newport, Rhode Island. The photograph shows the radiant couple surrounded by family members, friends, and notable guests in a ceremony that became one of the most talked about social events of the time. United States troops receive a small seasonal comfort during service in Vietnam in 1967. The photograph shows soldiers gathered on a base, smiling as they open packages sent from home or distributed by support organizations. An employee of the Douglas Aircraft Company performs riveting work on an A-20 bomber at the Long Beach, California factory. The photograph shows the worker focused on assembling the metal fuselage, illustrating the intense industrial effort that marked the period of mass aircraft production. Military motorcycles are put up for sale in 1946, soon after the end of the Second World War. The photograph shows long rows of vehicles previously used by the armed forces, now destined for the civilian public. A worker from the De Beers diamond mines undergoes an X-ray examination at the end of his shift in Kimberley, South Africa, in October 1954. The image shows a security procedure adopted by the company to ensure that no diamond was removed from the mines without authorization. A historic record from 1946 marks the birth of the Italian Republic after the referendum that officially ended the reign of the monarchy. The photograph shows streets filled with crowds, celebrating the result that deeply transformed the country's political system. The young Dalai Lama appears in this image recorded in 1937 when he was only 2 years old. The photo shows the beginning of the life of one of the best-known figures of the culture and spirituality of Tibet. Telephone operators work in Richmond, Virginia, in the United States. The image was made in 1884, recording one of the earliest groups responsible for connecting telephone calls. These professionals played an essential role in communication, manually making the connections between users. A sergeant is photographed feeding a cat with a dropper in 1952. The image shows a gesture of care and kindness, with the serviceman gently holding the small animal while giving food. President John Fitzgerald Kennedy is photographed sparing the ceremonial turkey presented to him at the White House on November 19, 1963, only 3 days before his death. A United States Air Force serviceman is photographed next to his girlfriend in Saigon in southern Vietnam in 1971. The image shows the couple walking through the city streets, enjoying a quiet moment amid the busy urban environment. A modern rural kitchen in the United States during the 1930s represents an important portrait of the transition between a traditional way of life and the technological advance that was beginning to transform domestic daily routines. A student of Pomona College in California in 1954 takes part in a practice known as a weigh-in, in which members of the American football team measured the proportions of new female students. The activity, common at the time, reflected social customs and student traditions that are viewed differently today. An office of the 1970s reflects the workplace characteristic of an era marked by significant technological and cultural changes. The photograph shows wide desks with typewriters, landline telephones, mechanical calculators, and stacks of paper, composing a vibrant and busy scene. Students of the University of Tehran are photographed in Iran in 1971, in a moment that reflects the intellectual and cultural atmosphere of the country before the major changes of the following decade. United States Navy pilots play basketball in the forward elevator well aboard the aircraft carrier Monterey in 1944 during the Second World War. The photograph shows a rare moment of relaxation and camaraderie among service members who used brief breaks to ease the stress of operations at sea. The American President Richard Nixon offers a Pepsi Cola to the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev in 1959 during the famous American National Exhibition in Moscow. The photograph records a symbolic moment of the so-called cultural Cold War, when the United States and the Soviet Union sought to demonstrate the superiority of their ways of life. A freight train crosses a high railway bridge in Arizona in 1895, while two men stand on the roof of one of the cars in an impressive display of courage and balance. This photo shows Greta Garbo posing next to the famous Leo the Lion, symbol of the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer film studio. The image was made in 1926, during the beginning of her career in silent cinema. The record shows a curious behind-the-scenes moment in Hollywood when major names took part in studio promotional campaigns. The legendary American boxer Muhammad Ali and the famed Brazilian soccer player Pelé meet in 1977, in a moment that brought together two of the greatest sports icons of the 20th century. The photograph was recorded in 1939 at Wawel Castle in Poland, showing the last Polish veterans of the January Uprising of 1863. These men had fought decades earlier for independence and freedom, becoming symbols of national courage. Greek men pose for a color photograph made around the 1920s, using the autochrome Lumiere process, one of the earliest color photography techniques. The image captures with rich tones the traditional clothing and the details of daily life of the period. Students enjoy a ride on a Ferris wheel in Kyiv, in the then Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, in 1986. The photograph shows young people smiling and looking over the city from above, enjoying a moment of leisure amid student daily life. A funeral ceremony in honor of Tomáš Masaryk, founder and first president of Czechoslovakia, held in Prague in September 1937. The photograph shows a large crowd gathered in the streets of the capital, paying last respects to one of the most important figures in the history of the country. An automobile leaves the heat chamber after being painted at a General Motors factory in Oshawa, Canada, in the year 1959. The photograph shows the moment when the newly painted vehicle is exposed to the environment, still with the intense shine of fresh paint. A rum machine in operation during the 1950s. The photograph shows an industrial device designed to distill and bottle the beverage in an automated way, reflecting advances in production technologies of the time. The legendary Beatles rooftop show took place in London in 1969, marking the band's final live concert. The performance occurred on top of the Apple Corps headquarters on Savile Row and brought together John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr in an impromptu set that surprised passers-by and nearby workers. Tippi Hedren is photographed in her kitchen in Los Angeles in 1982 beside a tiger that she kept under her care. The actress, known for her roles in films by Alfred Hitchcock, also devoted herself intensely to the defense and protection of wild animals. Frank Zappa is portrayed in London in the year 1975 beside his mother, in a rare moment of relaxation away from stages and recording studios. Known for his innovative and experimental style in music, Zappa was a central figure in the progressive and alternative rock scene of the time. German soldiers are portrayed in flooded trenches, in the year 1943, during one of the harshest periods of the European conflict. The image shows men facing extreme cold and damp conditions, trying to stand firm while water filled the shelters dug into the ground. Martin Luther King Jr. and other leaders of the civil rights movement watched President Lyndon Baines Johnson's speech on television in 1965, in a moment of great historical importance for the United States. A photograph portrays a rural landscape with small properties scattered across the countryside, known as homesteads. The record shows simple houses surrounded by fields and wooden fences, representing the agricultural way of life of a time when subsistence depended on direct work on the land. British troops of the 3-4 Commando are recorded in Manchester before departing for the coast of Korea on May 10, 1951. The photograph shows the soldiers equipped and ready for the mission, symbolizing the participation of the United Kingdom in international operations of the period. An advertising poster in Moscow displays a campaign promoting different kinds of fish and meat. The photograph, made in the mid-20th century, shows billboards and colorful signs that illustrate the importance of food in urban life and in local commerce. A man stands amid a crowd after the announcement of the beginning of the First World War in 1914. The photograph shows expressions of surprise, concern, and curiosity among people gathered on a busy street. A movie theater in central Moscow displays posters for the film Lights on the River, released in 1953. The photograph shows the building's facade lit by signs and posters, attracting spectators to the premiere of the production.